Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. The U.S. could help Israel against Iran in exchange for lethal aid for Ukraine. So, a Defense Intelligence Agency document that has surfaced as part of a trove of leaks suggests that the U.S. believes it can pressure Israel to provide lethal aid to Ukraine. So, a photo of this document has been circulating online, and it shows that this DIA analysis, which is what this document is, it lays out four possible scenarios in order from most plausible to least plausible that could result in Israel providing Kiev with weapons. This top secret document is titled Israel Pathways to Providing Lethal Aid to Ukraine, and it is dated February 28th, 2023. And I have found a copy of this document online. I put it in the story, and I couldn't authenticate it, but it does match reporting in all these other mainstream outlets that have had access to these documents. They're not publishing the documents, but they're discussing a lot of their content. So I think this is real. And so the first scenario that they outline is the idea that Israel could adopt a Turkish model for Ukraine under US pressure. And what they mean by that is that Israel could sell weapons to Ukraine through third parties, but at the same time openly advocate for peace talks to end the war, like Turkey has done throughout the conflict. And Turkey has been able to maintain good relations with Moscow. The second scenario is if Russia decides to supply Ukraine with more advanced military equipment, if they increase their military relationship, they sell them those Su-35 fighter jets that Iran wants, or some other equipment, or they support Iranian weapons programs. This analysis says that could make Israel go ahead and provide what they call lethal aid to Ukraine. Now, the third scenario is very, very interesting. It says that Israel could request expanded U.S. support for counter-Iran activities in response to Russia allowing advanced conventional Iranian weapons through Syria. In exchange for the U.S. support for these Israeli operations against Iran, Israel would provide lethal aid to Ukraine. So the background, if you look at the document, they have these four scenarios, and they each have a little background blurb. And the background for the one about the U.S. possibly supporting Israeli operations against Iran suggests that Israel has already asked for this, that they're already asking for U.S. support. So this background reads, quote, Israeli defense leaders are advocating for increased risk-taking to counter Iran, including proposing bilateral U.S.-Israeli operations. Israel has regularly requested ATG overflights to support strikes in Syria, end quote. So ATG overflights, ATG is likely a reference to the Al Tanf garrison, which is a U.S. base in southern Syria. So back in July 2022, there was a Wall Street Journal report that said the U.S. and Israel had been coordinating on a lot of Israeli airstrikes in Syria that are launched from the direction of this U.S. base. According to the report, the vast majority of Israeli airstrikes that pass this base, the Al Tanf garrison, have been approved by the U.S. So when Israeli planes fly near that base to launch their airstrikes in Syria, the U.S. has to approve it. So the U.S. is signing off on Israeli airstrikes in Syria. And then the fourth scenario, which they said was the least plausible, is if Russia incurs casualties from Israeli airstrikes in Syria, if Israeli airstrikes kill Russian troops or something, and then Russia starts firing on Israeli aircraft, because Russia has a lot of air defenses in Syria, and that's why Israel has not been sending Ukraine what the U.S. wants them to, is because they want to keep relations good enough with Russia so they don't have to worry about them impeding their operations in Syria. So since this document was published on February 28th, Israel has dramatically ramped up airstrikes in Syria, including one strike that killed two members of Iran's IRGC. At this point, there's no indication that Israel has pledged to provide the lethal aid that the U.S. wants them to, but that still doesn't mean that the U.S. and Israel are cooperating more on these Israeli airstrikes in Syria or other Israeli operations. There was another report of a small drone attack inside Iran, and Israel has a history of launching attacks like that. So there's a lot of possibilities here. And just when it comes to what Israel has given Ukraine so far, the biggest thing on March 15th, Axios reported that Israel approved the export of an anti-drone jamming system for Ukraine, which uses electronic warfare to down drones. Israeli officials have said that the export does not mean their position has changed, since the system does not have live fire rounds that can kill Russians. And the timeline on this, the Axios report said that Israel first notified Ukraine that it would give them this anti-drone system was on February 15th, which was before this DIA analysis was published. So I don't think they would consider that lethal aid. And the DIA document mentioned 3 Israeli weapon systems that the U.S. wants them to send, including the Barak and Spider air defense systems and the Spike anti-tank missile, which is the equivalent to the U.S. Javelin. So I just thought this was interesting. And, I found the document that appeared to be the right one. So I just wanted to give it a lot of attention. When it comes to this, U.S. cooperation with Israel over Syria and Iran, I just think it's very, very under reported, the extent of Israel's operations there and the possible U.S. cooperation. The next one here. So we have a lot about these leaks, and there's a lot of questions about these leaks, and I'll try to, get into some of that as well. But the next one here says that Ukraine could run out of air defenses by May. So Ukraine could run out of missiles for its Soviet-made air defense systems by early May, giving Russia the chance to achieve air superiority in the country. This is according to the Wall Street Journal, and they cited some of these leaked government documents that have appeared online. According to a Pentagon slide dated February 28th, Ukraine could deplete its missiles for the Buk air defense system by April 13th, which is very soon, and the S-300 systems by May 3rd. While the U.S. and its allies have provided Ukraine with Western-made air defenses, Kiev is still mainly reliant on its older Soviet-made equipment. According to a map from another Pentagon slide, if Ukraine depletes the systems, most of Ukraine's infrastructure outside of Kiev would not have air defense protection. So the document said that the number of unprotected critical sites would go from 6 to 40. Russia began large-scale bombardments of Ukrainian infrastructure in October 2022, causing Kiev to deplete much of its air defense systems. The document said that Ukraine was also on track to run out of ammunition for some Western-provided air defense systems, including the NASAMS. The latest U.S. weapons package for Ukraine included ammunition for the NASAMS. That's the National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems. But these munitions are being purchased for Kiev, meaning that they could take months or years to be delivered. So the document suggested a few solutions. One short-term solution would be for the U.S. to procure more ammunition for these Soviet-made systems, but most NATO states that have them have already sent what they have to Ukraine. A medium-term solution suggested expediting the delivery of the NASAMS and Patriot missiles and other Western systems. In the long term, the document suggests delivering enough Western systems to cover the whole country. And the leak obviously could spur more calls in Washington, I bet, from members of Congress and in other Western capitals to send more arms. I think that this leak could certainly serve the purpose of justifying more U.S. military aid for Ukraine. And when it comes to their authenticity, U.S. officials have told the media that the leaked documents are authentic. And there seems to be a lot of them. More of them are popping up. I know some people are wondering maybe this was an intentional leak. They're trying to seed a narrative. But it seems like there's just a lot of stuff coming out. I'm not sure how a lot of this would really benefit the U.S., including spying, which we'll get to in another one here. But, I'm not sure how to explain these leaks, what purpose they serve, who did it. Your guess is as good as mine. So please let me know what your theories are in the comments and stuff, or if you want to email me. So the next one here, this is from the Washington Post, and this just came out Monday night. This looks to be another new document that I haven't seen reported elsewhere yet. And it says that the U.S. doubts the Ukraine offensive will yield big gains. So Ukraine's challenges in massing troops, ammunition, and equipment could cause its military to fall well short of Kiev's original goals for an anticipated counteroffensive aimed at retaking Russian-occupied areas this spring, according to U.S. intelligence assessments contained in a growing leak of classified documents revealing Washington's misgivings about the state of the war. Labeled top secret, the bleak assessment from early February warns of significant force generation and sustainment shortfalls in the likelihood that such an operation will result in only modest territorial gains. It's a marked departure from the Biden administration's public statements about the vitality of Ukraine's military and is likely to embolden critics who feel the United States and NATO should do more to push for a negotiated settlement to the conflict. The document, which has not been previously disclosed, is among a trove of U.S. national security materials discovered last week in an online messaging platform. That's right. These first appeared on Discord, which is very strange. And it looks like they were up in early March, and nobody really noticed them until recently. Both the Pentagon, where much of the leaked materials appear to have originated earlier this year, and the Justice Department are investigating the matter. And then this just gets into more of the leaks, but this is a interesting one, and it's another one showing that Ukraine's in rough, not in as good a shape as the U.S. has been portraying it. And, we do know, Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has publicly said, that they should negotiate, that, Ukraine's not going to be able to retake all the territory they want. So you wonder, maybe one possibility is that this is an insider. And most of these documents are labeled, that they're not supposed to be shared with other countries. So that means just Americans would have access to them. So maybe somebody in the Pentagon or somebody said, was getting frustrated with the fact that the truth, isn't really getting reported in most media and leaked them maybe. But then why would they leak them on Discord? I don't know. Maybe a way to separate themselves from it. And they figured people would find it eventually. I don't know. But anyway, the next one here, another leak shows that Ukrainian SBU agents attacked a Russian plane. So members of Ukraine's security service, the SBU, were involved in an attack on a Russian A-50 military surveillance plane in Belarus that occurred on February 26th of this year. And this is according to The Economist. And they cited one of these top secret U.S. documents that is part of a trove of leaks. So according to The Economist, the SBU determined on the day of the attack that their own agents in Belarus had defied orders and attacked a Russian surveillance plane. The U.S. learned SBU agents were involved in the attack by spying on Ukraine. The description of the SBU assessment is marked SIG. The acronym indicates material derived from particularly sensitive signals intelligence, such as phone taps or electronic intercepts. So just eavesdropping on the Ukrainians. And according to what is believed to be a photo of the document that I found online, pretty blurry and just a section of the document. But it reads, quote, Security Service of Ukraine officials assessed that its agents in Belarus violated orders and attacked a Russian A-50 aircraft at this airfield in Belarus, end quote. So they're saying that the SBU didn't authorize this, but their agents went ahead and attacked this plane anyway. And you think about escalation concerns with that. And at the time of the plane attack, I remember, because I covered it, Belarus's exiled opposition celebrated the operation. They kind of took credit for it and said Belarusian partisans were responsible. On March 7th, Russian media reported that Belarus's State Security Committee determined that Ukrainian SBU was involved in the sabotage. So these leaks show that the U.S. is spying on officials in other countries, including Hungary, South Korea, and Israel. The Economist report also said that the U.S. was spying on members of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. So that's very interesting. And I'm going to get more into the spying stuff probably tomorrow. I want to look more into the South Korea one, try to find some of these documents. So if anybody sees them, email them to me, please. It seems like they've been deleting a lot of them. I was searching on Twitter. It seemed harder than the day before to find anything. So please, if anything, even if you think it might be fake, just send it over. I want to check it out. All right. The next one here, a Russian-backed official says that Russia controls 75% of Bakhmut. So the head of the breakaway Donetsk People's Republic, the DPR, that is the breakaway republic in the Donetsk Oblast in eastern Ukraine. He said on Monday that Russian forces control 75% of Bakhmut and that the fighting was still raging. So this is Denis Pushilin. He said that the forces control over 75% of the city, but he said it was too early to say that Russia controlled all of Bakhmut and said that there was still fierce fighting in the western districts of the city. So that's really the situation now, is that Russia it does look like, according to the maps, they control most of the city, but fighting is still going on, and Ukrainian forces are still holding on to the western portions. Excuse me. All right, getting into some China stuff. The next one here, China declares an end to their 3-day drills around Taiwan. So China's People's Liberation Army on Monday declared an end to 3 days of major military exercises that it held around Taiwan in response to Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen meeting with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in California. So the drills included live fire exercises and marked the largest Chinese show of force in the area since Pelosi went to Taiwan back in August. So the meeting, I went over all that background yesterday. Just the fact that McCarthy is now the highest level U.S. official to ever meet with a Taiwanese president since 1979. It's pretty significant. So these latest drills, they were called the Joint Sword exercises. They were shorter than the exercises that China launched after Pelosi's visit, but they were significant in testing Beijing's ability to blockade Taiwan and launch precision strikes. So Taiwan's defense ministry said that it detected 91 PLA aircraft and 12 vessels on Monday, which was the most that they detected during the 3 days of drills. So out of the 91 aircraft, 54 of them crossed the median line, which separates the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. Again, China used to not cross that barrier. They used to do it very rarely until Nancy Pelosi decided to go over there. And now, they're doing this because they want to send the message that these House Speaker meetings, they don't want them to become a normal thing. McCarthy's only the third House Speaker to meet with a Taiwanese president since, again, 1979, when the U.S. severed diplomatic relations with Taiwan to open up with China. So tensions between the U.S. and China, they show no sign of waning. As Tsai returned to Taiwan, she was met by Michael McCall, the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, who was over there in Taiwan. So the next one here, a U.S. warship sails near a Chinese-controlled reef in the South China Sea. So this was on Monday. This was during the drills, the big drills around Taiwan. The U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet said that a guided missile destroyer, USS Milanus, sailed near Mischief Reef, which is a Chinese-controlled reef in the disputed Spratly Islands. So just to show the overlapping claims here, again, it's not just China. Taiwan, Vietnam, and the Philippines, they all also claim sovereignty over this reef. So China's, the PLA said that the U.S. warship illegally intruded into the waters. And this is usually what happens. They say that they, chase the U.S. ship away, and then the U.S. says, no, you didn't. We came and went as we please. So if you're watching here, you could see the map. This is the Spratly Islands, kind of close to the Philippines, further away from Taiwan than other disputed islands like the Paracel Islands. So that's where they were at. And, 12 nautical miles, that's pretty close. On a clear day, you could see that over the horizon pretty easily. So the 7th Fleet framed the provocative passage as a routine operation. Starting under the Obama administration, the U.S. started doing this, sending warships near Chinese-controlled features in the South China Sea, and they call these freedom of navigation operations. So the latest FONAP, that's the abbreviation, they came as the PLA was conducting these big exercises around Taiwan. So again, tensions are very high in the region. And here the U.S. decides to send a warship near this Chinese-controlled island. All right, the next one here. This is from Kyle Anzalone over at the Libertarian Institute. Senator Lindsey Graham is open to using U.S. forces to defend Taiwan. Surprise, surprise. So Graham called for America to abandon its long-standing China policy and said that he is open to sending U.S. soldiers to Taiwan to defend the island. The remarks came amid escalating tensions and a diplomatic freeze between Washington and Beijing. In an interview on Fox News, the senator was asked if he was in favor of sending soldiers to Taiwan. Graham responded by calling for changing America's policy toward China. So, for decades, Washington has refused to say whether it would defend Taiwan if China invaded. They call this strategic ambiguity. It has deterred Beijing from attempting to retake the island by force and at the same time quelled the appetite for declaring independence in Taipei. Graham said strategic ambiguity was not working. He added, quote, "I believe in a one China policy, but I would be willing to fight for Taiwan because Taiwan is a democracy. We stood with them for decades," end quote. So the senator predicted that a conflict with China could happen in the next year. He said, quote, "I think they're setting the stage possibly for a blockade of Taiwan, that the Communist Chinese Party is going to test us dramatically this year and next year before the election," end quote. So he claimed that there's a limited amount of time for the U.S. to prepare for the coming conflict. He additionally explained that the U.S. was willing to send, Graham additionally explained that he was willing to send U.S. troops to fight for the island. He said, quote, "Yes, I'd be very much open to using U.S. forces to defend Taiwan," end quote. And again, Michael McCall said this over the weekend. Similar thing, said sending troops is on the table. And if you hear what Biden's rhetoric is, he says, yeah, I'm going to send troops if China invades. But it seems like what Graham is calling for here is more of an official change in U.S. policy that could come through legislation. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some legislation drawn up, to push U.S. policy in that direction. All right, the next one here, a rocket attack targets a U.S. base in Syria. So a base in Syria housing U.S. troops was targeted in a rocket attack on Monday. So according to the Associated Press, the U.S. military said that there were no casualties or damage in the attack, and it targeted the mission support site Conoco, which is a U.S. base located on the Conoco gas fields in eastern Syria's Deir ez-Zor province. As part of its occupation of Syria, the U.S. controls much of the country's oil and gas resources. So U.S. bases in Syria frequently come under attack, and the continued occupation always risks sparking a wider war. So while the U.S. says that its troops are in Syria to fight ISIS, the U.S. military typically blames Iran and its allies for these types of attacks, but they never provide evidence for the claims. So another attack, and the reason why, even though there were no casualties or damage, I just wanted to draw attention to this is because they can always really escalate this. Back in, I believe it was August 2022, there was a drone attack on a U.S. base, no casualties, no damage. Biden responded by launching airstrikes against these Shia militias in Syria and killed a few of them. So, sometimes he chooses to do that, to just, even if there are no casualties. So it's just always a volatile situation, and it's just something to always keep an eye on. All right, the next one, this is from Politico, actually, and it says that the GOP embraces a new foreign policy, bomb Mexico to stop fentanyl. So this is from Alexander Ward. It says a growing number of prominent Republicans are rallying around the idea that to solve a fentanyl crisis, America must bomb it away. In recent weeks, Donald Trump has discussed sending special forces and using cyber warfare to target cartel leaders if he's reelected president. And Reps Dan Crenshaw and Mike Waltz, they introduced a bill seeking authorization for the use of military force to put us at war with the cartels. I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene said that she was a co-sponsor of that now. So you have the neocons like Crenshaw, and then, kind of the populist right, I guess, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump also calling for this stuff. It's disappointing to see because some of them are good on Ukraine and stuff. And then they're saying, let's bomb Mexico. Let's turn the drug war as hot as we possibly can. And I didn't realize that there was also a bill introduced by several it got a lot of sponsorship by Lindsey Graham to label the cartels as a terrorist organization, and that could be a pretext for taking military action against them. So listen to who is against this reckless idea. Not all Republican leaders are behind this approach. John Bolton, Trump's third national security advisor, who's weighing his own presidential run, said unilateral military operations are not going to solve the problem. So if John Bolton says you're being too hawkish, I mean, I think that says a lot. And House Foreign Affairs Committee Chair Mike McCall, who's also an ultra hawk, he said that he's still evaluating the AUMF proposal, but has concerns about the immigration implications and the bilateral relationship with Mexico. So, and right now, this seems to be just the Republicans calling for it, but there could be some Democratic support for it in the future. Right now, it's just the Republicans, really. But I mean, man, they're really hawking it up over this. A lot of them. It's just not a good sign for the future here. All right, the next one. North Korea tests an underwater nuclear weapon. This is from Kyle again at the Libertarian Institute. So Pyongyang has tested an underwater nuclear attack drone. The strategic weapons test comes as Washington and Seoul have carried out multiple rounds of war games. Amid the heightened military activity, Pyongyang has stopped communication on a joint line with Seoul. So less communication between the two sides. On Monday, the North Korean state media outlet KCNA issued a statement saying that Pyongyang carried out a test of its Hail-2 weapons. And this is an underwater drone that's apparently capable of detonating a nuclear weapon. The exercise started on April 4th and ran through the 7th. And this came as Washington and South Korea and Japan conducted anti-submarine war games in the waters near the Korean Peninsula. Prior to the unilateral military exercises, U.S. and South Korean forces conducted the largest war games on the peninsula in 5 years. And later in the year, they're planning to conduct their largest ever live fire drills. So escalations continue on the Korean Peninsula with no end in sight, unfortunately. But that's it for the news. You could go check out our viewpoints. We have one from Ron Paul. Peace is breaking out in the Middle East, and Washington is not happy. One from Philip Linderman, War Without Conditions. It's at the American Conservative. And we have one from Jonathan Cook, Al-Aqsa Raids, How BBC Coverage is Enabling Israeli Violence. One from Elias Yusuf, If We Don't Sell Them Arms, Someone Else Will, is a myth. And the spotlight is from Mansour Adaifi, Beware What Belies the Smile of Ron DeSantis. So this is over from a former Guantanamo prisoner who says that he met DeSantis at Gitmo, and DeSantis did work at Gitmo, and they're saying some bad things about what he was up to over there. So go check that out. But that is it. That's everything for today. Again, tomorrow I'm going to do some more on these leaks. There's a lot to it. One thing I forgot we had on the page yesterday, but I skipped over it when I was doing the show, was that I might get into this more in another story, but that the leaks also say that the Pentagon or somebody or some U.S. agency assesses that Mossad, the Israeli spy agency, was encouraging its agents to get involved in the protests against Netanyahu, which is interesting. The Israeli government denied it, of course. But there's a lot of opposition to Netanyahu within the Israeli establishment, within the military and whatnot. So it's interesting. Again, that's part of the reason why I don't think that these leaks were all just intentional by the U.S. to kind of put out a narrative, because there are embarrassing things like spying on South Korea, spying on Israel, and all that. So, but again, let me know what you think. And if you come across any of these documents, email them to me, DaveDeCamp@protonmail.com. That's everything. You could always support us at antiwar.com/donate. Like and subscribe on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble, share it around. Tell your friends. I'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for listening.